Okay. And we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking About Survivor. I'm Christiana Ellis.
And I'm Mike Contine.
Tonight, we're going to talk about Survivor Season 35, Episode 2. And Luna's walking over paper bags or something behind me. I don't know what she's doing back there. So we're getting into the mix now with the season. You know, we're past the premiere and moving forward. Get introductions to a few more of the castaways that didn't get much time in the premiere.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you have general thoughts, or should we just go into our chronological play-by-play?
It's funny because my general thoughts will lead to we should probably just go into the chronological play-by-play because there was nothing that really grabbed me about this episode. Like, it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just an episode.
Yeah. There wasn't anything like, whoa. It was like, There's not a lot of like new surprises per se, but run of the mill.
Wow, that was really interesting. Like, even just from an interesting standpoint, like even outside of surprises, like it just was pretty much. Let's just go chronologically through what happens in an episode and the things that happen. That's kind of how I felt about this one, which isn't bad. I mean, it's, as we talked about last time, it's early in the season of one where, they're all new players.
Right.
So we're going to kind of go back to that feeling of what it used to be like that we were sort of spoiled with when they bring in returning players.
Having to get to know everybody.
Yeah, we got to get to know everybody. Everybody's a little bit more cautious, because returning players come in a little bit gunning a little bit more because they're already so advanced in the game that they can kind of skip this part, and so, but it's fine. It doesn't make it bad. It just makes it. I mean, actually, it's good. I like that we're back to this, but it doesn't make for a
right. Well,
profound thoughts on the episode.
What's especially good is that they mix it up. That it's just not the same thing every time.
Right.
Like you got to have a bunch of new players every so often, or else you start getting stale on which old players are coming back.
Right. Because
new blood.
Your well gets smaller.
Yeah. So, as we started, we begin with Chrissy, very happy that the tribal council is exposed cracks within, the other 4 remaining on her tribe, and she still has that idol, which something I guess I hadn't fully thought about, which is that just because she didn't use it that time, she didn't feel like she needed to, and we talked about that was probably the right call for her, but now she also still has a kind of impressive looking idol, which wouldn't actually work. But in terms of having a fake idol that looks like the real thing.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that either. I am pretty impressed with her so far. Like kind of her, where she started in her, the bad hand she was dealt, how she has now played that into a much better position. Yeah.
Now that we're getting to know her a little bit, and she's not only being described. Sorry, you broke up a little bit.
I said even looking back, like Armchair Survivor in it, she's done things that in game that I wouldn't have even thought to do, even after having reflected on it. So that's pretty impressive. So.
Yeah. So she's feeling pretty good about where she's at, especially as an improvement to where she was before. Meanwhile, Alan still, he's basically taking from all of this that his plan still worked in terms of creating suspicion of the power couple. But then we immediately cut to Ashley saying how she thinks it just showed everyone how off the hinges he is, and Ben now saying he's starting to believe her more, and saying the core 4 is gone, which doesn't necessarily, we discussed last week about the relative merits of his approach, And it's, it may well be true that people are a lot more wary of the idea that JP and Ashley might be a couple together. And they seem like they're actively moving away from that now for fear of that very suspicion. But at the same time, it did seem to also have the effect of disrupting any other alliances that he might have.
Yeah.
So kind of a toss up there. He hurt other people's games while hurting his own. So it's kind of an open question, I suppose, about whether the harm done to anyone else offsets that. But we'll see. No fallout from it this time or anything. We have over on the Hustler Tribe. They're doing pretty good. They feel like the Hustler Tribe has momentum. He is very happy to have formed a partnership with Devin, who actually this episode seems a little bit smarter than he seemed last week.
Yep.
Yeah. So last week it seemed like he was just sort of like stereotypical surfer dude, but he's a little sharper than that. It would appear from some of what we hear from him this week. And Ryan continues saying he has a connection with everybody on the tribe except for Simone because she's weird. But more to the point that she's not doing a good job of assimilating with the rest of the tribe.
No, she did not do that.
No. So we definitely, it's always a weird situation to contemplate because on the one hand, there's the normal social dynamic where you want people to, be nice, even if someone is weird, maybe make an effort to bring them in. But the moral obligation math is different on a game like this. If someone can't kind of do their own lifting as far as the emotional labor, it really just brings everybody else down when you can't afford for that to happen.
Right.
There is some stuff from her it's nice to see, but it's also like, she's talking about having a hard time with the outdoors, but making an effort nonetheless. Like, volunteering to gut the fish when she had only ever read about how to do it. But that said, having studied how to do it, she accomplishes it. So it's nice to see someone kind of pushing out of their comfort zone, even if in the survivor context, it may be that she's, everyone else ends up seeing her as kind of remedial in that sense.
Right, because, Suri will always be the gold standard of this. Mm-hmm. And, well, not from a social perspective, but from out of her comfort zone.
That was a big part of her narrative from the beginning, was that she got off the couch to do it, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to be deficient in the comfort zone of actually like playing the survivor, you've got to excel in one of the other parts of the game. Like that's just that you can't be, narrative can't be, I kind of am bad at all of this. Because like you said, yeah, it's great to see from the story, okay, cool, she went and did that. But if you can't come back and then be socially networked, then you're not going to be very good at this, and it's not going to last long.
Yeah.
Suri did a great job of befriending people and socially working it because she knew she was deficient in the other part. And there have been people who have been socially awkward who have been, massive providers and huge challenge winners. And, they then survive based on that. And what are coming out of their comfort zone becomes like actually having to trust other people. And then there have been people who are not good at challenges and are outside their comfort zone, but are strategic masterminds. And their narrative is to come out of their social zone and to try these challenges while being, but if you're not actively, working everything strategically, you're not great at the outdoor, the survivor part of Survivor, and you're socially awkward, that leads to an early exit, as so happens here.
You kind of have to have one of those things to begin with, like an even one is maybe not enough, but
well, you can
certainly.
have, to your point of like watching someone grow, if
Mhm.
you're growing through the other two and you excel at one,
Right.
then you can be. But if you don't grow or don't excel at one, then you're in big trouble. Yeah.
Yeah. So she kind of unfortunately, like not necessarily a failing as a person, but she was kind of unfortunately deficient in all three categories. She wasn't bonding with everybody socially. She was not able to lead them to success in the solving the puzzle. To the contrary, under her leadership, they went from being first to start the puzzle to finishing last. Which, you can't put that all on her, but at the same time, she certainly, she kind of was in that position of responsibility. And, by the same token, she, was maybe helping some around camp. Like she seemed like she was doing some stuff, but not, like there was a lot of effort, more so than needed, like, cause it was all so new to her.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, we have Ali or Allie probably, talking about what we kind of just said, which is, understanding that Simone is she is putting herself out there. She is making an effort and says there is some value there. And she actually tries to encourage her to, coach her on the social part a little bit, because she's kind of thinking, well, like if I can have her, at my side, I can sort of groom her to be a good ally.
Yeah,
Tells her to.
she's not, making it super negative sounding,
Mm,
but she
yeah,
is preying on her weakness, like,
yeah.
but not in a nasty way,
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
There's, yeah. I
She
think
is
I see what
exploiting.
you mean.
I'm saying it, but I don't want to say it like it's a nasty thing from Allie's
Right.
part. There's sort of a mutual benefit to her in that she is exploiting the weakness while also can help her,
Yeah. Well, like, yeah, it's symbiotic. Like this idea of I'm hoping that helping her will pay dividends later on. That sort of
Yes.
thing. But it's not just like a mercenary thing of like, oh, I'm planning to use and exploit her, so much as I hope that she can be, that we can be allies to each other if this works out, which, didn't kind of turn out that way. Um, Actually, one thing that I want to bring up now, because it doesn't ever explicitly come up in the episode, but I've learned about this since then, is that apparently Patrick and Allie knew each other pre-game. They went to college together, apparently, and they knew each other already. Which is, like, I don't think that's like unfair or anything, but it seems like notable information that it's a little surprising that the show wouldn't fill us in on, because I noticed in the episode that there was a few places where it felt like something must have happened between them that we didn't see, because she was talking about stuff with him that we had no context for. And I wasn't sure what that was about, but apparently it's because they had they knew each other already.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I had only just read about that on Twitter afterwards, because a few people were discussing kind of that question of like, is that something that the show should have let us know? Does it really not matter that much? I don't think it's that critical, but it is kind of interesting context. It seems like it would have been relatively easy to spend 7 seconds in one of her confessionals saying, turns out, Patrick and I actually know each other from college. Like, I don't know, you don't have to spend like a lot of time on it, but
Yeah.
I don't know. So in any case, though, Allie's advice to Simone is that she should be more optimistic and self-deprecating, which is actually good advice, because self-deprecating and humility like can be effective, but if you overuse it, it really just starts coming across as needy, like you're just constantly fishing for other people to reassure you.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, over at the Healer's Tribe, Jessica and Cole like each other. They're being very flirty. They go fishing together. Yeah.
Yes.
Blooming
Which
showmance.
is, yeah. I mean, I think it's only more interesting because of how Joe misinterprets like the clue and thinks it's like in the raft that they're on, and makes like this super weird like thing where then like Cole has to like help him out.
Yeah. There was some weirdness there that ended up working out mostly okay in Joe's behalf, but because he said it himself, he probably wouldn't have found it otherwise. But yeah, it did kind of turn into this weird thing where he, because of his own misinterpretation, he now has a partner that he hadn't intended on.
Yeah. Which I thought that was more notable than them fishing together, was the fact that like he's trying to like sneak over to see if in their fishing they found the idol that's on their raft that's not actually on their raft.
Yeah. In fairness, I could see the resemblance. Like, if you don't make the connection with the well, the sort of rectangular boxy shape of the raft, like it's not completely unreasonable connection.
Well, it wasn't idiotic, and that's why, like, I guess that's why I was saying, like, why Cole and Jessica going out on the raft, like, was more notable. I guess I skipped a beat there because we got to the end result, which is what Joe. That is probably why Joe was triggered to notice that, is because it was noticeable that Cole and Jessica were on the raft. The raft is in his mind. Sees that thing, thinks it's the raft. Like, that's what I'm saying, because they were kind of gooey fishing together.
Sure.
That partly caused Joe, in my mind, to misinterpret, because he was predetermined to like think that, which then led to him having to encounter Cole about it, and then leads to the other part. So I sort of skipped that beat of, but them going out together was led to Joe having to partner with Cole, and that's why I found that interesting. So
yeah. We also had a little bit with Joe before we got into the idol stuff, of him talking about him and Mike being the ugly guys on the beauty tribe. And then we also get more glimpses at Joe's kind of playful slash, I was going to say sociopathic, but I don't mean that in a serious way, as much as more just a matter of this whole thing of, Mike's kind of growing on me, but not enough to keep him around. That sort of thing is just, like, on the one hand, that's kind of the attitude you should have in the game. Like, if you feel someone is the target, you should be able to kind of get past, especially early on. You're not necessarily worried about the jury, but at the same time, he's pretty glib about it. He doesn't seem to be having any kind of a struggle at all.
Yeah. But his comment there is an example of when self-deprecation does not sound like fishing for compliments. I don't think he was really genuinely looking for anybody to be like, no, you and Mike are beautiful in your own way.
Yeah.
I don't think it advanced anything, but it was humorous and did not feel as though he was fishing for compliments.
Right. But in some ways it can almost sort of feed back around and become like a little bit creepy, because it's like not even to Mike, but like on behalf of the others, it's kind of a backwards way to say, oh, everybody else is hot. And I don't want to, I don't want to overstate it either. Like, I'm not trying to say he is creepy exactly, but it can go, that sort of statement can go in that direction too. But in the meantime, he has been trying to see that Mike has the idol still. But he also it's kind of funny that he mentions that and then just spins right into, but that also kind of makes it more complicated for me to look for it, which I want to do. Because if I'm trying to tell everybody that he has it already, how much are they going to believe me if they see me looking? I love the idea of the clue painted on the tree, so you can't just take it. It's like anyone could find it still.
I also liked their solution once they had found it.
I'm forgetting. What did it? What did?
They chopped it off.
Oh,
Cole chopped off the clue.
okay. See, I must have been looking away from the screen or something, like typing a note when that happened. I didn't catch
It was
that.
quick, but yeah, after they found it, Cole and Joe went and they hacked it up with the machete, which again I hadn't thought of.
Yeah,
it makes sense. Like, of course, you can do
that's
that.
smart. I still like the idea, but yeah, that's smart of them to try to take it out in that regard. But so we talked a little bit about this already, but so Joe really suspecting that he's trying to, get a sense of whether Cole might have found the idol or not. And that sort of leads to, well, I guess I'm going to tell you about this clue I found. Maybe you can help me. But it's always one of those things where whenever people are looking for an idol together, and it becomes this thing of just like who gets their hands on it first. Like I always kind of vaguely wonder if there was a discussion of like the protocol for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, is there a discussion of like, I'm bringing you in on this so you can help me. And if you help me, then we'll be allies, but I still get it if we find it. Or is it just really a case of we're going to be a team, but whoever gets their hands on it first gets to hold it?
Yeah, I feel like you might want to do that. Maybe. I don't know. It's that you're right. It is always a weird thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Because, I mean, as soon as Joe found it, he basically proceeded with the immediate assumption that he was going to keep it. And we didn't see Cole really react to that like in any negative way. Like, hey, we didn't talk about that. It seemed he was just on board with the idea that he and Joe have the idol. Even
right.
if, really Joe has the idol and he has the idol, but you have no way to influence, or you could talk to him, I guess. Yeah.
And Joe seems to take it exactly the other way in that, he has the idol all to himself, and Cole knows about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he didn't explicitly say that, but the way that he spoke, that seemed to be his mentality.
Yeah,
this is my idol that Cole knows about.
Yeah.
So Cole wouldn't have known about the clue if I hadn't shown him.
Yeah,
but it is kind of awkward that he's the one that helped me find it by interpreting the clue.
Yeah, and I mean, you could see that argument being made of like, I have information that you don't have, and as sort of a bonding good faith thing, if you help me, then you will be in on this secret, and we'll be partners in that sense. But the arrangement is that you are helping me to find it.
Yes,
because it's it's kind of like there'd be maybe there's a question of a finder's fee, but if it's your information to start with, then you are expecting to get the end result.
Yes.
Yeah. Meanwhile, over at the Heroes Tribe, we have JP catching lobsters. He wants to be a provider. He's annoyed about having been labeled as part of a power couple, especially since he doesn't really consider it to be true. And so he's kind of feeling like I'm getting blamed for being part of a power couple without actually having the benefit of really actually being in one. Which, he's frustrated to have to be doing repair, I think is what he says.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, fair is, and it's kind of confirmation for us that no matter how they might have seemed a little buddy last time, that at least from internally within their couple, they didn't actually really consider themselves to be a strong power couple. They considered themselves to be 2 of 4 up until the point where that kind of imploded. He discusses a possible partnership with Chrissy, And it's interesting that they are kind of mutually amused by their own differences, in the sense that they feel like others would think it unlikely that they would have this connection. And so that if they can be partners but try to keep that on the down low, that people wouldn't suspect. And Chrissy says JP could be a challenge asset, but maybe isn't that smart, is what she said. But we also kind of get her doing the rundown for us of like, who are the people that are around now. So, okay, JP strong, but maybe not the strategic partner. She doesn't really trust Ashley for reasons that are not necessarily clear. Concerned about partnering with Alan, but ultimately seems to decide that Ben is probably the best option as far as the real partnership.
Yes.
And he seems on board with that. But again, it's kind of like, I think it's the nature of this stage of the game. We've talked about this before. If someone comes to you and says, hey, you and me, let's work together, right? The answer is never no. Even if you don't actually intend to do it, you should say, oh yeah, totally, I'm on board for that.
Yes, I agree with that. However, where I think this falls a little outside of that sort of generic definition of that, or, of that scenario, is that, Chrissy researched everybody in a way, like went and actually talked and felt everybody out. Ben is in a position, and we didn't touch on it too, and I don't want to get into it too much, but because I didn't want to derail the whole thing, but, I still think that Alan's intention was how I described it last time, but the fallout has been more towards what you were concerned was going to happen. So I don't think he just like crazily blew everything up. I think his intention was to lay everybody out there and cause this tension. Well, that tension has not necessarily benefited him, though it may in a back way if she ends up working with Ben and Alan comes along, and or if they all stay together because of a merge or whatever, like he may still make his way out of this. But I think you were right that he definitely caused more tension than I think he intended, and that I even read in that first episode, probably because I was being an apologist for him.
Well, I think there's always complexity in these things, right? So it's true, probably. Like, we had JP talk about it this time, just the idea that he definitely feels the pressure, and now he has apparently backed away from Ashley a little bit because of this perception that Alan created. And so to that extent, it seems like Alan did get the effect he was looking for. He just also sabotaged himself more than he meant to in the process.
Exactly. And that's why I think it fell right between what we both were kind of, we made it very binary last time.
Yeah.
Which, as you said, they're much more complex than this. So the intention to call attention to the power couple and to kind of open up the lines of communication across everybody totally worked. The fallout of having done that, which was more on your side, absolutely happened. And Chrissy's not even considering him. Ben's a little wary, though he still probably wants to work with him.
Yeah.
But he's going to be a little bit more. That's also why Ben's a little bit more open. I mean, Chrissy has also exploited the fact that this happened by seeing that JP is, now needs to spread out to other people other than Ashley, and is going to be open to working more with her because, there's tension between him and Alan, and he doesn't want to be a power couple. So that's an opening for her to like make them a 3 as opposed to a 2. Ultimately decides that's not right for her. And that's where, but so to go back to the original point, the situation that they're in and that Alan essentially laid out for them by creating all this tension makes, and her ability to kind of go to everybody and talk to them first and sort of get to know what Ben's about before saying, you know what, I think that you and I are the best choice to work together. Like, that proposal is more genuine and in a time where he's more open to it than just the generic. Not that you're wrong about, of course he's going to say yes. Everybody would say yes. But there's a little bit deeper connection to this that I like.
You know? Oh yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think I got into the weeds a little bit in terms of the abstract strategy, which, we've talked about this a number of times too, the idea that you can come up with all of these strategies that work in the abstract when you're saying, with a hypothetical group of people, this would statistically seem like the best option. But all of that math changes when you're dealing with actual individuals who may have a very different reaction than what the abstract envisioned. Yes. But yes, I agree with you that, Ben was in a place to be more receptive than he had been previously, for sure. Let's see. So, meanwhile, we have Patrick trying to conquer his fear of crabs, which is a little weird because it just like the thing that I couldn't stop laughing at last week was this, I forgot I had a crab in my pants, but that seems like a little bit weirdly contradictory with his apparent fear of crabs in this one.
Maybe it created his fear of crabs.
Or it was a whole kind of affectation to begin with.
Also could be possible based on
his whole wild banshee hashtag.
Yeah, I read a summary that I don't know where it was. It described like this part of the thing is like, Patrick's antics could jeopardize or whatever. And I just thought that was so dead on. Like, these are just antics. Like, that is a good term for what these things are here.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he is just really like this all the time. I mean, that's possible. But at the same time, I would suspect that even if that's true, it's antics all the time, whenever he does it, because it really does have that sort of adolescent class clown vibe to it. Yes. A lot of the stuff is kind of very immature in its presentation and really kind of just reeks of, hey, everybody, pay attention to me. We're laughing, right? Right? Isn't this fun? That sort of thing.
Exactly. Like, here's the definition of antics: foolish, outrageous, or amusing behavior. And that's what this felt like,
Yeah.
Just kind of outrageous, foolishness,
Right. Well, and, to some extent, he may be playing it up deliberately with the specific idea of,
for sure,
I want to be the, Oh, right. Yeah. But, so, I mean, that, makes it self-aware antics as opposed to driven by some subconscious thing. Although that's probably in there too. We've talked over and over again about how people rationalize after the fact that whatever they were doing anyway was always a strategy. But his whole thing of like, well, I'm going to be the fun one that keeps morale high, and that's why they'll want to keep me, but without kind of the awareness that's going to reveal to him that mostly he's just getting on people's nerves. Lauren especially, as it turns out.
Right. So there's a self-awareness in that he is behaving in an outlandish way. There is not a self-awareness of the reception to it. And I think that's evident in what seemed to be a throwaway line in Tribal Council, where he says, I trust most people here. And everybody kind of latched onto that. Like, it didn't even connect to him.
Yeah.
That's not that people are going to hear that a different way. Like, so there is there's a gap in the awareness of how others perceive his behavior.
Right.
Even if he is truly aware of what he is choosing to behave like.
Right. And the other thing is too, that's the sort of, misspeaking sort of thing, because I don't even really feel like it was a Freudian slip with him, because we weren't really aware of him having a problem with anybody.
No, I think that was just
had a problem with him. Right. But for everyone to kind of, to everyone kind of harp on that and make it seem like, oh, that means something. is I don't want to give other people a hard time for that, but I think it's evidence that he has not really formed substantive relationships with people, because otherwise I don't think they'd give him such a hard time about that.
That's an interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. That's an interesting take on it. I like that. I had thought of it more of, again, not. I agree with you in that there was not a Freudian slip there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it showed, to me, it showed his lack of awareness of the social affectations that you do have to turn on at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And that whether you do only trust most people, you don't say you only trust most people.
Right.
Like that's interesting that you caught it from the way that their response was. I like that. That does make sense too, that they're sort of primed to go after him.
Mm-hmm.
He is sort of okay, Simone is like the obvious target, but then like he was kind of a target too because of these things. And
yeah.
And they're reminded of that and reminding him of that in a way,
Right. Well, and to the extent that his primary mode at camp, is these antics, it produces kind of a very superficial relationship that, like, in theory could be deepened with one-on-one conversations, but it seems like those were maybe not happening as much as they could have. And so I feel like if people really felt like they had made a connection with him and did feel like there was something deeper there, I feel like they would probably not react to that in the same way. But I don't know. I feel like
because just you just see this right now in the climate in general, and I'm not. This may sound like it's political, but it's not. I mean, it's everything with everybody, entertainment, sports figures. I mean, words are starting to matter so much more, and you're right. You can tell by the reaction to what the words people say are kind of.
Mm-hmm.
There's sort of a default, and it either reconfirms a bias or and so that's kind of, I think this is a small. Again, we always like to draw these, how this is a microcosm of things. And that's exactly like, if you say something stupid in your post-game interview on a sports team, you can tell the people who are the most outraged by it are the people who never really liked you as an athlete anyway, or disagreed with something else about you, and they're kind of primed for that. That's exactly what happened here. Like, everybody jumped on this because they already disagreed with him and didn't have a true relationship with him. Yeah, that's why I was so kind of struck by your catch of that. I didn't get that, and that is an actual great analysis.
Wow, thank you. So as we were watching his hashtag Wild Banshee antics, which again I just really feel like, well, I guess I'm saying this for the first time, so it's not again, but Wild Banshee is just, that's a weird self-applied label. Am I wrong here? That just seems like.
Nope.
Anyway, he is definitely, yeah.
I mean, Banshee is not. I think he probably thinks a banshee is like a Tasmanian devil.
Yeah. Well, it definitely means he's loud. You know what I mean? It's like he screams a lot.
I think because I think that because I've heard that before, where that term, that's not the new thing to me, where so that term wild banshee is that's exactly what they're thinking of, and that's why I said that. Is I don't remember who it was, but somebody I had a conversation. I mean, this was years ago, who described something that way, and I was like, it's not. I don't really think that's what you're talking about. And they were like, yeah, like, like the cartoon with the guy who spins around. It's like, no, that's not a banshee. Like the Tasmanian devil.
Yeah.
Like they legitimately thought it was the Tasmanian devil. Like, so that's something I've already. So maybe I'm appropriating this to him, but
I don't know.
You can kind of hear that term, like, because it sort of means. Yeah, I don't know.
That's interesting. Actually, I'm curious to wonder now if they're like exactly, what a banshee is. What is the cultural penetration of that in America? Like, what do people? Because I feel like I know what a banshee is from this Disney live action movie that I watched on the Disney Channel when I was probably 9 or something like that, called Darby O'Gill and the Little People. And there's a banshee in that because it's full of like leprechauns and Irish folklore and that sort of thing. And there's a banshee in there that's, pretty scary. It's a scary part of that movie. And so that's like in my head, that's banshee. It's not very much like the Tasmanian devil at all.
There's one I kind of always thought of it as but
sorry, you broke up again in the middle there. You always thought it was
like there's that one ghost in Ghostbusters that kind of screams.
Yes. Yeah.
That's where I always thought of it as.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But,
well, we could deep dive into banshee folklore, but perhaps instead we can move on to how Lauren was especially irritated by Patrick's antics. But she's also trying not to make too big a deal about it because she's already feeling a little bit like she's maybe the outsider of the group, which is interesting just given that what we had heard, from others about Simone being an obvious outsider. So we can't help but wonder if maybe Lauren is someone who's kind of just a little bit aloof by nature, a little bit wary of, she always maybe feels a little bit like an outsider, just because we didn't hear anyone else describe her that way. But she thought that of herself.
Yeah, I didn't notice that, but she clearly.
But in any event, she's trying to build a relationship with Allie. And then this is the bit where we had Allie talk about a little bit worried with being connected to Patrick, talking about calling it babysitting, things she can do without him. And I didn't really catch it in my notes, but I remember thinking at the time that it felt like she was talking about they had connected in the previous week or something, but we didn't ever see that. But apparently it was, they had this pre-existing connection. I don't think they dated or anything. They just knew each other.
Yeah. I don't see them as two who would have dated.
No, I don't think so. I didn't get that at all. But it did seem like she was speaking as though there was at least some level of expectation that she would be working with him, and that she was considering whether that was actually useful to her or not. That's anyway. But so that brings us to the challenge. As we're getting ready for the challenge, we have Ryan talk a little bit about the hoping to eventually have the opportunity to tell Chrissy that he gave her that idol. But he's not going to go out of his way to do it now, especially since it's not likely to matter at the moment with them on separate tribes.
Yeah, I mean, and that's clearly a good move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I actually did nothing.
Oh, sorry. Did you cut off there? I feel like
I guess it must be mine, but yeah, it just seems to slow down here every once in a while.
Yeah. So it's mutual, but yeah, I think I missed the middle of a sentence, but it was maybe you saying that it was slowing down on your end.
Yeah.
I loved the signpost puzzle. I feel like they maybe have had that before. I couldn't remember for sure, but I do like it. Just the, I don't know, the spinny dynamic nature of it is just it's kind of fun. The way you test if it works is you try spinning it around, and if it can go through, like, I think that's cool.
Well, I like that it's a little more complicated than it looks at first, because the pieces attached to the pole are not uniform in length.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not like you just pick and you can say, okay, like this one is the longest, so we need the longest piece here, because the longest piece might not actually like.
Right. It might go on a shorter base, whereas a shorter piece goes on a bigger base and actually extends further. Yeah. I mean, obviously that was what they were struggling with, because they, there was lots of kind of trial and error where you'd put everything on and like, does that work? No. Okay. Well, I guess so. This one obviously needs to be somewhere else. Where could it go? Yeah.
Yeah. So it makes this incredibly like complex, like kind of like an IQ puzzle, but in this very like complex, like multi-dimensional, because not only are they, because if I remember correctly, they're not all the holes aren't on the same place either. Like they're in different,
yeah.
Like the pass-throughs aren't, it's not like one sheet with like all the pass-throughs, right? Like those are staggered.
Well, yeah, I think that all of the pieces had 2 pegs and 2 holes, but it wasn't really obvious whether they were all the same or not. Like there might be some pieces that would only fit into certain slots, but they didn't make that part super obvious. Because, I mean, in theory, you could have it just be that every piece could go onto every position, and it's only whether or not it can spin through the gates that tells you whether it's right or not. Are you still there? You look like you might be frozen. Yeah, I think so. Okay. Well, let's see. Let's talk about the challenge is for immunity and the fishing kit reward. Great big fishing kit for first place, and lures and line for second place. Are you back? You froze up there for a second on my end. Oh, still unstable. Oh no. Yeah, I'm not getting anything from you right now. Whoops. Are you? Yeah, I've gotten like 2 whole words out of you in the last 30 seconds. All right. Well, and they're dropped off the connection. So hopefully we'll have Mike back in a little bit. But so we had the challenge initiated for fishing kit, good early game stuff. All right. Welcome back.
Yeah, I think my Wi-Fi was out, so I just went, since we're close here, I just went on my hotspot, and we'll close it out on that.
Great. Yeah, so I was just getting into, I described what this was for. Yeah. Well, and immunity and the fishing kit is what is, up for grabs here. And then the Hustler tribe was off to an early lead with the swimming bit. The Hero tribe was a little bit behind, and the Healers much further behind. But the puzzle just didn't work out for them. So it was kind of actually interesting, though, to see, again, the Healers arrive at the puzzle last and still get first place. We've got some sharp puzzle solvers on that tribe, it seems.
Yep.
Yeah.
God. Oh, this is frustrating.
Oh, your wireless connection?
Well, yeah, I'm on my hotspot, and it's like it was like totally good until you like ended and like threw it to me to say something, and then
oh no,
you froze. So I figured like I was also probably froze.
No, well, or at least I didn't notice. You seem like the connection is a lot better at the moment, but yeah.
Okay, well that's good.
So,
yes, I mean the only thing that I think you've moved past this, but yeah, so I won't dwell on it too much. I was really impressed with the puzzle and the spatial ability that was required to like make it work, like because you could predict. It wasn't like it was only trial and error. Like you could kind of say, okay, certain, your certain size sign, certain size base, certain size away. This is likely, and then you test it. But that's what you have to do, is you had to test like as you were going, like not put them all in based on what you think and then spin it, and then you're like, oh damn, this one, like whatever hits first is the one you're pulling, but it's like there could be 4 other ones wrong. It's just because of the way that you spun it, that's the one that hit first. Like, so there was some bad trial and error in it, as opposed to like there was anyway.
Well, yeah, I think as a strategy, when you realize you have one that's too long and won't go through, you should definitely try to spin it back all the way around the other way to get a sense of what other piece might be too short for where it's going.
Yes. And
or certainly too, if any others are too long.
And the other thing that I think the tribes that solved this the most quickly figured out is that the pieces were designed to have like an inch clearance. It wasn't like some had a foot clearance and some were like a millimeter. They all had about the same clearance. So you could, like you said, if you had done what you say, you find one that's too long, take it out, spin it back the other way, find which other ones that don't like, but you can also look for the ones that have large gaps.
Yeah.
Say, okay, well, that's probably, even though it's spinning, that's probably not correct because the gap's too big.
Right.
And I think that's what caused, like, they didn't explicitly call that out, but I think some of the teams figured that out, and it's why they escalated through the movement of the puzzle.
Yep.
So anyway, they win the immunity, they win the fishing line. That's where you kind of were.
Yeah, well, and just specifically that the healer tribe has had 2 come from behind.
Yeah, I was able to hear that even if I wasn't able to.
Yeah. So while the order of starting the puzzle was hustlers, heroes, healers, it ended up being healers, heroes, hustlers as the finish order. As we go into the commercial break, we have Devin basically saying it's Simone has to go. She couldn't do the puzzle. It's a bummer, but ... It's kind of like, yeah, it's got to be someone. And we have Simone back at camp, aware that she's the obvious target. She does apologize for the challenge, which I don't know. What is your take on that? Like, because obviously these challenges are team efforts generally, and it's possible for one person to really screw up. But generally speaking, when it's not necessarily a case of one person obviously doing terrible, do you think it's the right thing to apologize in this way, or does that just kind of acknowledge weakness?
Yeah, I think it goes back to your earlier comment about her self-deprecating humor and humility, or her humility and Allie's sort of advisement about the self-deprecation. Like, there's a missed tone to that, and I think she mistoned this in like, this is not a time where calling attention to the fact that like you struggled at it is the right thing to do. It doesn't make people, it goes back to what you're saying, like fishing for compliments. It's almost like she wants people to say, no, you did great. It was a team loss. As opposed to like a genuine, like, hey, I can do better.
Yeah.
And so again, there's a complexity to when and where you should do that. Like, there are times I can absolutely see if things, something happens on the puzzle and again, you come back and don't just like apologize for the loss, just come back and say, hey guys, like I can do better than that. I know. And just, we'll get them next time. Like, but with more of that positive instead of that sheepish, like,
right.
I'm sorry, and
I know I let you down.
Yeah.
I have no counterpoint for why you shouldn't just vote me out.
Right.
But don't vote me out. It's kind of, she didn't even really say that. Although she rallied a little bit in the sense of actually making an effort, being aware that the tensions between Patrick and Lauren, and saying, okay, approaching Lauren and Allie, it's like, okay, well, are you on board for this? And it seems like they're potentially open, except that because nobody wants a tie, they would need a fourth person. Patrick seems kind of unaware that there's any question of it being anyone but Simone, which kind of just raises questions too of like how aware he is of the strategic part of the game. We certainly haven't really seen him talk about it.
No.
Allie approaches Ryan, who kind of acknowledges, yeah, he's kind of unpredictable. Maybe that's not great. But, you know, the concern of like, well, I was a little bit unsure because he also kind of talked about like Simone is really smart. So maybe that's like a reason to get rid of her. But we've talked in the past about, does it make any sense to talk about eliminating someone as a threat at this stage of the game?
Yes. Also, I know plenty of people who are really smart and not useful in certain situations. You know, like it doesn't. You can be smart, but not shown any utility.
Yeah.
So, like it's not a threat right now, and to call it out as a threat means, like, to me, that again, going back to Patrick's awareness, I don't think he's aware of the right reasons to get rid of Simone right now. And so he has sort of created this one. Like, I don't think he legitimately believes she's a threat. And that's why, again, go back to your abstract situation versus a specific. Yes, I agree with you. Like, this is probably not the time to be getting rid of threats. However, I don't think that's what Patrick's doing. I think.
Well, I was talking about Ryan, who had some.
Oh,
of
I'm
this.
sorry. Yeah, Ryan.
Yeah. But that said, I did kind of, because that whole idea of she's smart and maybe a threat just didn't play. You know what I mean? It's like he said that, but it was kind of hard to even really believe that he meant it, much less that would be a good reason.
Right, and now that I remember who said that, you're right. It sort of changes. It's still the same concept for me in that, like, I don't think it was a legit reason. I think it's like a sort of a rationalization when you can't like put your finger on like,
or you don't want to say something mean.
Yeah, like we're gonna get rid of her because we just don't think she fits in or adds value. Like that's like a hard thing to say when you don't really, you know, say that. But you know, Ryan's not Joe, and so yeah, it doesn't ring true. It's like, oh, we want to get rid of her because she's smart, not because she's. You know,
Now, you know, like it's interesting to think about that in the context of remembering this is, you know, in addition to a competition with everybody there on the island, it is also a TV show. And so being a little savvy in terms of awareness that what you're saying, even just to the camera, may well end up on national TV. And you may
words matter, and everything you say gets broadcast so wide.
Yeah. So it could be a case of just like, you know, don't say something mean if you don't have to. And so in any event, we have him telling, you know, Allie and Simone that, you know, maybe I would be willing to go with Patrick, but he seems non-committal about it and says to the camera that he's not sure. And that, you know, a lot of that I think was coming down to ultimately the editing trying to make it seem like it was a, you know, more up in the air than it probably ever really was, because he kind of humored them. But I think that, you know, Allie was only ever on board just kind of like, well, hey, let's see how everybody else feels about it. People aren't enthusiastic, they'd rather Simone, then that's fine. Let's just do that. Yeah. And then Lauren, I think, even though finds Patrick irritating, seems like she's level-headed enough to not let that be the motivating factor, right? It wasn't even really her proposing this plan other than being annoyed by him. And it was Simone kind of trying to say, well, we could do something about that. But yeah, ultimately it was a unanimous vote. And I think that just is, you know, speaks to everyone was kind of on the same page, really.
Yes.
How'd you like Ryan's awkward birthday party analogy for tribal council?
I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. You know, you don't really want to go, but you know you kind of have to, but you're and he just kept digging even once it became clear, like, not sure this works, so I'm going to try adding a lot of detail to justify it. And I'm thinking, I relate to this.
Having to add a lot of detail to justify that it wasn't working, or
well, making awkward metaphors for things.
Yeah.
Just generally, and that being a tactic when you realize that a metaphor is not working very well. You know, you just kind of say, well, instead of giving up, plow ahead.
Yep.
Like, no, it definitely works, and here's why. Let me explain to you at length.
I thought it was funny.
Yeah. That was fun. I like Ryan. I'm continuing to enjoy him, and I think he's a good player, and he seems like he's doing a pretty good job of not getting ahead of himself, which was one of our worries for him.
Yeah.
So Lauren talks about the idea that hustlers usually work alone, but they can be a team if there's enough communication, which is, you know, sort of generic. It's an excellent example of the sort of thing that you should say in tribal council, because it sounds meaningful. It uses some buzzwords, but does not actually reveal anything that you don't want everybody to know. Yeah. We've talked before about just the sub game of navigating Probst's tribal council questions, and trying to give him an answer that will satisfy him and make him move on to someone else without actually showing any of your cards. And then we talked a little bit about the whole, I feel like I can trust most of the people here. But, you know, the way people reacted, and then he obviously got nervous about it afterwards, because I think he sensed when everyone turned on him for that he was a little bit like, oh, wait, what's going on here? Am I missing some piece of something? And everyone else is going, yeah. Not today, but there's a little bit. And then everybody spent way more time than necessary talking about the very obvious point that nobody wants to go home. They spent a lot of time, it felt like a lot anyway, of everyone just saying, yeah, we don't want to get voted out. We want to be here. It's early in the game. We don't want to get voted out early in the game. We want to stay in the game because we want to play it some more. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of obviously. I mean, I was kind of just, I was surprised at how much time they spent on that, especially on a, yeah, but so Simone voted out. You know, I don't think it was a big surprise. In her final words, she talks about, you know, being proud of herself for trying something she wasn't fully comfortable with. You know, obviously disappointed, but living with it. You know, pretty standard, reasonable human emotional response to what happened. But, you know, it's also kind of a case where
this is how the episode went. It's pretty standard things happen, you know.
Yeah. It was connected to what we talked about already with her, that describing the show as something she wasn't comfortable with is a little bit different, a different way to say it than, you know, getting outside my comfort zone, for example, right? You know, it's you know, it raises kind of the question of if something goes beyond the idea of, oh, it's an exciting adventure, things I've never done before, and sounds like there was maybe a little bit more fear involved there, which would probably seems, I don't know if I'm projecting just based on that having been my analysis of her.
No, I mean, I think that's fine. Makes sense.
Yeah. But next time, war erupts between Lauren and Patrick, as it seems obvious that it might, because that was kind of one of the ways that the tension could go, and now Simone is gone, so where else would it be?
Yep.
Yeah. And then in the meantime, Cole targets Joe, which sounds to me like it's a case of, well, maybe he wasn't so fine with just letting Joe have that idol. Yeah, so I don't know. Or maybe that he just, as the more he interacts with Joe, the more he starts kind of going, oh, Joe is just going to walk all over me if I let him.
I think that's likely to be what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's it for this time. Any final thoughts on this episode?
No, my initial thoughts remain similar to my final thoughts. Yeah.
Pretty standard. It's a standard episode. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So thank you everybody for listening and or watching, and we'll be back next week for Survivor Season 35, Episode 3.
Yay.
Good night.
Good night.